All right, guys, so we got to talk about this fascinating but heated debate between Candace Owens and Chris Cuomo on Patrick Bet-David's Valuetainment podcast, a debate that I never thought that I would ever see. Okay, a conversation between Candace Owens and Chris Cuomo. Yeah, it was as entertaining and fascinating as one would expect a conversation like this to be, okay? And this particular conversation that I want to react to is about Joe Biden versus Vladimir Putin. And this came up because Candace Owens noticed, just like I noticed, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people noticed, doing this interview between Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin that got a whole lot of backlash from the mainstream liberal media, that Putin is operating at a different level intellectually than American leadership. And just watching Putin talk, go over the history of Russia and the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it leaves a lot to be desired of American leadership, okay? We really don't have too many true intellectuals become president of the United States the way that, you have somebody like Putin be president or dictator of Russia, okay? And I think it does speak to the quality of leadership that we are electing to office in the United States of America. I noted that in my reaction to the Tucker Carlson Vladimir Putin interview. And it's not just Putin, okay? There's also other leaders too, like, for example, Nayib Bukele, okay, the leader of El Salvador. I think he's operating at a different level than most of the leadership in the United States of America, particularly when you look at the Democrat Party. I just think that looking at some world leaders, other world leaders, and how they're operating, and then you look at somebody like Joe Biden, yeah, it's clear and obvious that we're not sending our best, right, to be president of the United States, to lead what is supposed to be the greatest country in the history of the world, okay? So Chris Cuomo is going to get triggered by Candace Owens bringing up this point about how Putin clearly is operating at a different level intellectually and cognitively than Joe Biden. And again, Chris Cuomo is not going to like this. He's going to get triggered and lose his mind over Candace Owens bringing up something I think should be clear and obvious to most people who were watching that interview between Tucker and Putin. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Picking a metric of what's the guy's IQ is not enough for me. First of all, he did not give you. I'll tell you why. Because it's what do you do with your intelligence? You think he gave you an accurate recitation of Russian history starting in the 8th century because Candace just said so. She's wrong and you're wrong, okay? He did not give you an accurate recitation. He gave you a KGB doctored look at why it's okay that he wants to reestablish the Soviet Union.
Yeah, so again, I think this is probably one of the most ignorant things I've ever heard somebody like, Chris Cuomo say, somebody who's supposed to be a journalist, because it's not about justifying what is happening with Ukraine and Russia, okay? That's not really what it's about. In order to understand any conflict like what is happening with Ukraine and Russia, you have to understand the history of the conflict. And that is why Putin talked about the history of the conflict, is because you need to understand the history of those two countries. I mean, he went all the way back to Catherine the Great, okay, who was leader of Russia during the mid and late 1700s. She was actually a very fascinating leader. She was one of the biggest 304 thoughty leaders of all time, okay? But she was an Enlightenment leader that ended up leading Russia to take over the territories of Ukraine, some parts of Poland, Crimea, in the war against the Ottoman Empire. And this is why you have a lot of Russian-speaking people, a lot of people who basically are ethnically and culturally Russian in that region. And it's important to understand that because that is central to the conflict in and of itself, okay? So for a journalist to come out here and to say that, oh, well, Putin giving a history lesson is not important, or to try to diminish it, it really shows you how ignorant Chris Cuomo is just in regards to how history plays a role in modern day conflicts, okay? Now, one other thing I want to say about Catherine the Great is that she's always the leader that I point to when people want to come up here and make an argument about how we need more female leaders because there's less chance of war and destruction and violence with female leadership. Like, female leaders are more composed than men. Men always want to go to war, blah, 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 blah. No. Look at Catherine the Great. She was a major warmonger, and she was responsible for the Ottoman Empire suffering some catastrophic defeats, some of the most devastating defeats in the history of that empire, right? Okay, so again, the history is fascinating, and the history is important to understanding the conflict in and of itself. And again, I'm just shocked that Chris Cuomo would say something like that, but that is something that the whole mainstream liberal media has been doing. They dismiss Putin's history lesson, but Putin's history lesson is actually important to understanding that region and the history of it, which again is fascinating.
That's what he gave.
Oh, stop it.
Listen,
Stop
I'm not
it.
here to play Russia good, Russia bad, okay?
Russia has a smaller GDP than California. He's
So
not,
what? So what? They're also invading a country right now just for
that
avarice.
Americans are economically
Look,
so unintelligible that they are going to believe
what I'm
that
saying
the threat
is-
that we are facing today is Russia trying to reestablish. So this is like Cold War propaganda. We gotta move on from that, okay?
But it's just as real now as it was
the
then.
1960s.
And remember, in America, these people are allowed to be here right now doing things they could never do in Russia. Never. Nobody can speak out against Putin. He is at over 75% in popularity polls because people know what happens if you answer differently. They make no money. They have no press freedoms. When they try to exercise themselves, even on the internet,
Starting to
they
sound
get
like
chased.
America today, because January
Well,
6ers
and-
are locked
and that
up
is-
for
and that
wrong
is
think.
something
You locked
to-
up grandmas for expressing
That
their
is something to be
opinions.
concerned about.
You are saying
That is
that
something
if you
to be
speak,
concerned about.
That is correct.
Not
Freedom
admired,
of press. You're
but
sitting
used
here.
as a point
they
of
wanted
fear.
to arrest Tucker Carlson for going over to speak to a leader of a country that we are allegedly not at war with.
Listen.
So you're also describing America while you are telling us.
I am not describing America.
Yeah,
I'm describing what America should not be. So be careful about putting up a model of what you think has some value.
Nobody said there
That's
was a
what I'm
model.
saying.
We just said that it's
That's what I'm
very
saying.
obvious that Putin can complete a sentence and that Biden can't.
Yeah. So again, this is pretty hilarious from Chris Cuomo, okay? Because again, I think Candace brings up a great point about how all the things that Chris Cuomo is fear-mongering about, which are reasons why he think that you can't say anything good about Putin, right? You can't say nothing good about Putin, or else you want America to be just like Russia, right? Again, which makes no sense whatsoever, okay? I don't understand why he's making that connection, even though it doesn't make sense to make that connection. But anyways, that's what he's doing. But the point that Candace is bringing up is that all the things you're complaining about, that is what America is becoming under Democrats and Joe Biden. Okay, because for as much as Democrats want to boohoo, whine, and cry about Alexei Navalny, who was Putin's political opposition, they're trying to make Trump Alexei Navalny, right? This is why they got so triggered by Trump bringing that up and saying, well, you guys are doing the same things to me that Putin allegedly did to him. Okay, I mean, he was barred from running for office. What did Democrats try to do to Trump? Trying to bar him from running from office. Dude was locked up in a prison, a political prisoner. What are they trying to do to Trump? They're trying to put Trump in prison, right? So again, the things that Putin does to his political opposition is what Biden Democrats are trying to do to their political opposition. But yeah, Chris Cuomo can't make that connection, right? He doesn't sound the alarm on that. Or maybe he does. I don't watch too much of Chris Cuomo on News Nation, but that's not what he's doing right here. Candace Owens is. And Chris Cuomo would be right to agree with her and to say, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I don't want America to become that, and it is a problem. That is what America is becoming right now under Democrats. But again, to say that saying anything good about Putin or saying that, hey, this is a good characteristic about Putin, even though, okay, yeah, Putin bad man, right? But, well, Putin smart. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that you want America to be like Russia, right? Again, that to me is the fallacy here that Chris Cuomo is presenting.
He can complete a sentence. He can also likely murder his opponents. And that's a function of his intelligence also, because it's not guided by any sense of morality. And that matters too. And Tucker making the decision.
Gonzalo Lira was just killed by Zelensky. He's a thug. We shouldn't be supporting Ukraine at all, not a single dollar.
Even if that were true, which neither of us know whether it is, then that's a policy argument. Have the policy argument. The idea of good and evil, right and wrong, cheapens it. It cheapens it.
But you just did that.
I'm not doing it. I'm doing the
by
opposite.
The fact
I'm
that
not
I acknowledged
triggered. What are you,
that
19?
Putin,
We're using 19-year-old woke language now that I'm triggered?
Okay,
I'm not triggered. I got my legs crossed. It means I'm comfortable.
Okay,
well, you are triggered. You are, because again, you're trying to present this fallacy that saying Putin is intelligent, or he's more intelligent than Joe Biden, and that is a reflection of our leadership, right, in America. You're trying to make it seem like, well, you're trying to say that you think America should be like Russia, and that's not what is being said. So again, you seem to be triggered to me, right? You seem to be very triggered, because if you weren't so triggered, you would be able to understand what she's actually saying, and you wouldn't take issue with what is clearly and obviously an observable fact about the difference between Joe Biden and Putin. They're not operating on the same level intellectually, and it's not even close.
Well, you just seemed a little triggered. You
well, I don't like setting up Putin as a model.
I didn't. Nobody here. Everyone is listening to what I said, and I'm gonna not just double down. I'm gonna triple down, quadruple down on the fact that it's very obvious to the American people that our leaders are extremely lackluster, and that has been made even more abundantly clear after having watched Tucker Carlson sit across from Vladimir Putin, which was heroic on his part, because we are tired of being propagandized. We are tired of people pretending, if you live in Russia, there's going to be so much propaganda. There's so much propaganda here.
I agree.
Okay, we are suffering from the exact same things that you accuse Vladimir Putin of doing.
I agree.
Locking up people's opponents, right?
I agree. I don't agree with locking up their opponents.
FBI agents showing up on American people's doorsteps because they attended a rally on January 6th. 3 of my friends had FBI agents. They didn't even step foot in the Capitol, okay? Had FBI agents show up because they wanted any person that even showed up to hear Trump speak on January 6th to feel threatened by that, because the establishment said that you weren't allowed to support Donald Trump, okay? So I'm going to speak to how the public is feeling right now. And we are very aware of the fact that Joe Biden could potentially be dead right now, okay? We don't even know, like he can barely make it through a sentence. And when we see somebody
you do
like
know
Vladimir
that Joe
Putin,
Biden is
who
not
is able
dead,
to,
right?
is what?
You do know that Joe Biden's not dead.
Tongue-in-cheek.
And you do know that he wasn't shot up with something
No, I actually don't.
before he went out there.
I actually do believe he was shot up with adrenaline before he goes. What do you mean, come on? JFK used to do that.
Come on.
So it's like,
listen,
they obviously are giving him drugs before he speaks.
The truth is enough. And I'll tell you why it becomes problematic, okay? Look, it's a half joke. They shot Biden up with something last night.
It's not a half joke. I really believe that.
Here's what happens. Oh, look, if you really believe that, that's fine. It would be just nice to have a basis for it.
Well, I mean, it's plausible, right? It's plausible that Biden might have been on something, okay? Because that, to me, seems to be the only way that he could have got through that speech without falling asleep, right? Because it was way past his bedtime. And Biden, again, got through the speech without any major gas, okay? He didn't have a Mitch McConnell moment. But if you listen to Joe Biden speak and some of his speeches after the State of the Union, yeah, he's having some major gaps, right? He went back to the old Sleepy Joe that we know. So it seems to me that they may have prepped Joe for the State of the Union to make sure he avoids making a major mistake that could ruin his campaign, because that's what his State of the Union address was. It was a campaign speech. But I don't think that it's implausible that Joe Biden may have been on some performance enhancers during that speech.
But yeah, he's going to take a drug test. Okay. Look, here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen, okay? Just trust me on this, because you've already seen it. You're going to know that it's already true. You are allowing for a BS standard of appraisal. So now...
Intelligent is a BS standard?
It's not intelligent. It's the shooting up part. So now they'll start showing clips of Trump where it seems that he's not speaking fluidly. And they'll talk about whether he's on drugs. And
they did that already.
They will, but that's what you enable with this. I'm saying just stick.
Well, no, we didn't enable it, because they were already doing that, right? Before Joe Biden started doing what he was doing, okay? I mean, I would say that the left enabled it, because they were doing that with Trump. So when you see Biden clearly, obviously, cognitively impaired, yeah, we're going to call it out. We're going to point it out, because they were trying to say that about Trump before the guy even took office in 2016. So everything that you see happening to Joe Biden in regards to criticisms really is happening because of the standard that they set for Trump, right? But the media is trying to make Trump and Biden seem equal when it comes to this issue of cognitive impairment, when it's just not true. Trump talked for hours on a daily basis, campaigning. And yes, he may make some mistakes here and there, but again, everybody will make mistakes if you're talking for hours every single day. The problem with Joe Biden is that Joe Biden's talking about meeting with dead people, right? Joe Biden doesn't know when or where his son died. Joe Biden can't remember anything about his classified document scandal. Joe Biden is so mentally impaired that he can't even stand trial. That's what we're talking about. Trump, on the other hand, clearly is not at that point. He's not. Trump is very mentally fit. Everybody makes mistakes. But what we're talking about with Joe Biden is the frequency of the mistakes and the clear and obvious visual signs that he is too old. Okay? That he's not all the way there. But again, this stuff goes over Chris Cuomo's head, okay? Because he's trying to play the fake enlightened centrist role. That's what he's trying to do. But really, he's peddling water for the establishment by coming out here and pretending like he doesn't understand the very simple point that, hey, listening to Putin talk and how intelligent he clearly is shows that, hey, we're lacking when it comes to American leadership, right? That we're not sending our best to represent us in Congress and in the highest levels of our government. That's the point. It's a very simple point.
Stick with the truth. Are our leaders performing the way we need them to be? It's a rhetorical question. No. You had in Congress last night, I forget who smacked me with this stat, but it was a great one. 14% popularity for members of Congress, right? That sounds about right. It's somewhere between 12% and 20%, depending on the poll. 94% re-election rate. How do you have such low popularity and such high re-election rate? Because the game is rigged.
Now, I do agree with Chris Cuomo when it comes to this. Yeah, the game is rigged, right? It's rigged in favor of Democrats and Republicans, okay? When people talk about the elections being rigged, yeah, you're right. They are rigged. They're rigged in favor of Democrats and Republicans. There's, for the most part, especially when you talk about the federal level. Now, the state level is different. I think at the state level, you actually do have a choice, right? There's a difference between Democrats and Republicans at the state level, okay, and how a state, is run. Again, look at the difference between a Florida and a California, right? There's a difference, okay? How you vote matters. Look at the liberal cities versus the not liberal cities. Look at the chaos and destruction. Look at the difference. Look at the crime. Yeah, there's a difference. You have an actual choice at the state level, at the local government level. At the federal level, not so much, right? It's the illusion of choice, okay? You're basically going to get, especially when it comes to foreign policy, right? Domestic policy might be a little bit different. You might get something different here and there, but when it comes to foreign policy, it don't matter who you vote in office, right? Democrat or Republican, you're going to get the same thing, right? They're all on the same page, okay? It's a false illusion of choice, okay? Especially at the federal level. Democrats and Republicans are basically damn near the same. And that's why they hate Trump so much, because Trump, when he got into politics, when he ran for president, he threw a wrench. For the first time in a long time, voters actually had a choice, especially when it comes to foreign policy. Okay, are we going to go with something different? So that's part of the reason why they hate Trump so much and why they're trying to lock him up, is because he actually gave voters a choice outside of the establishment Democrats and Republicans, which, they're basically the same. They're the uniparty.
That's why. Now, the truth is enough. Okay? Just stick with the truth. The problem is when you get into these situations of comparing a guy who's just a bad guy with what you want in your own leadership, I don't think it sends you to the right place.
The truth is that Vladimir Putin was able to communicate in a way that was coherent.
Would you want Vladimir Putin to be your president?
This is such a fine statement.
Would you want Vladimir Putin to be your president?
No, I don't think I would want Putin to be my president. I mean, let's keep it 100. I don't personally think that Putin's a great leader, right? Especially compared to some of the Soviet/Russian leaders of the past, right? I don't think that Putin Putin is Lenin, who led the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, he basically formed the Soviet Union. And then you got Stalin, who led the Soviets during World War II, helped take down Hitler. Now, he did also expand the Russian Empire to the West, okay, in Eastern Europe, and he was responsible for millions of deaths. Again, not necessarily a good guy, okay? I mean, some people will say that he was evil, right? But at the same time, I mean, in regards to his capabilities of being a leader, I don't think Putin is on that level, okay? I don't think Putin's on that level. Evidence of that is kind of look at what's happening with Ukraine. Russia, who's supposed to be a great military superpower, is in a war of attrition with a country that has significantly less military capabilities than they do. And some people may say, oh, well, that's not fair, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, I personally don't think that under prior Russian leadership or Soviet leadership that this war between Ukraine and Russia would have lasted this long, okay? That is to say that I don't think that Putin is as vicious or brutal as past Soviet/Russian leaders. And again, you could say from a moral perspective, that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that Putin is not Stalin, or that he's not Lenin, or that he's not Catherine the Great, right? You can say it's a good thing that he's not at that level when it comes to that specific attribute, right? Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have the qualities of a good leader, okay? Like intelligence, right? And when you talk about great leaders, you cannot simplify it to, well, great leaders are good versus bad, especially when it comes to morality. You can't do that because there are a lot of great leaders who weren't necessarily good people or who were tyrants, but we know that they were great leaders simply because of their accomplishments, what they did for their countries, even if they weren't morally good. I think everybody agrees that Napoleon Bonaparte was a great leader. Okay, I mean, his military tactics are studied to this day because they were so damn effective, right? Because he was a great leader of men. Okay, now was he morally a good person? No. Okay, millions of people died under this guy, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a great leader. Okay, so I don't think that it is intellectually honest to simplify what is a great leader by defining, that person as morally good or morally bad, right? I don't think that is the way we should be judging great leaders, okay? Because I personally think that when you talk about leading a nation, morality kind of goes out the window, right? I don't think there's too much morality when you're talking about empire building, when you're talking about making a nation great, which requires a lot of bloodshed, right? It requires war to conquer, okay? So again, if we're talking about morality, if we're judging people based off morality, I'm not sure how you can even say that Biden is a moral leader or has some type of moral superiority to Putin, because Biden has had to make decisions that are immoral, okay? I mean, we have conducted military operations, military campaigns in the Middle East in order to kill people, okay, under the direction of the president. And every president has had to make that decision. Again, this is why you can't judge leadership based off moral standards, okay? Because if you're doing that, then there are no great leaders, right? All great leaders are evil people because they've all had to make immoral decisions. It's about what they did for their nation, right? What did they do to conquer other nations? That's what it comes down to. That's why I don't, buy into this, I think, very simplistic idea of good versus evil when you're talking about geopolitics, because that's not what geopolitics has ever been about. It's about the strong versus the weak. Strong nations survive, weak nations go extinct. It is what it is. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying judging based off morality, I don't think that is a good measure for a good leader, okay, or the standard of a leader, okay? So, yeah, I think that Chris Cuomo's analysis here is very simplistic.
That's not what I said.
I'm asking you a question.
That's not what I said.
I'm asking you a question.
No, but you're asking the question because you still cannot deal with the fact that I have accurately described Vladimir Putin as coherent. He is.
There's no question he's coherent. I'm just saying.
Do you think he's smart?
I think he's an intelligent man, yes.
That's all I said. Oh my God, we got there. We can move on. Good. Listen. Oh my God, we got there. No. It's just, that's all I said, right?
But
okay,
it's
cool.
about why.
Yeah, so again, I guarantee you, if Candace followed up with Chris Cuomo saying that, oh yeah, I think that Putin is intelligent. Okay, so you must believe that America should be like Russia, right? Or you must want Putin to be our leader. I guarantee you he would say that's ridiculous. He would say that's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous conclusion to draw from that statement. But that's what he just did to Candace for saying that, yeah, I think that Putin is more coherent than Joe Biden. Again, amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You're using him as an instruction. I have sat across from serial killers that are intelligent men. I don't want them deciding my taxes.
Did I say that I wanted Vladimir Putin to decide my
taxes? Why hold him up as an example? Why hold him up as an example?
Because that's our adversary, right? When you look at other nations that we're supposed to be competing against, and you're saying that, okay, yes, he might be a bad man, right? Putin bad, okay? But look, he has qualities that make him a better leader than our leader, right? Intelligence is one of them. I don't think that's you saying that, well, I want Putin to be our leader, right? That's not the same thing. Again, I'm not sure why Chris Cuomo is not grasping this very simple concept. But again, I know what it is. It's the derangement that our media has when it comes to Russia. Anything Russia bad, right? Anything Russia bad. Okay, so again, there's no room for nuance when it comes to these types of conversations.
Talking about
it's like when Trump said Duterte is a tough guy.
Everyone else is able to comprehend this, so I'm going to reset it one more time.
One more time.
Okay? We are talking about the State of the Union. I am talking about the mindset of Americans that understand this is all very performative and the insult to have him up there as if he is the leader of our nation, especially following the interview that we all watched in which Vladimir Putin first and foremost made it clear that he doesn't view our leaders as even leading the country. He views them all as puppets, and that he deals,
but you're still using Putin as a positive comparison to who we have. I mean, I don't know what I'm missing in terms of the logic.
This is how I take it,
you are missing.
Chris. This is how I take it from the outside. I take it as I want to know everybody's leader on how they are, how formidable they are, and can mine go up against that leader. If Putin and Biden are in a negotiation table, we're gonna lose. That's all I'm thinking about. Exactly. So for me, I think about somebody being able to sit up against them to say, hey, you got to knock it off with this Ukraine stuff. By the way, let's process this in a different way. We had, I don't know who I was having this conversation with. It's like, well, you know what do you think about this and what do you think about that? I said, listen, we have 4 years of data, pure data of what happened under Trump. They can't play that same game as, aren't you afraid that he has access to the button? He's actually one of the 46 people ever who had access to the button and never used it, and there was no wars, right? For 4 years. It was peaceful. We didn't have no Ukraine, nothing, Afghanistan, nothing going on, no Israel, Hamas, nothing going on, right? This guy's here, he's got access to everything for 3 years. What do we have going on? What we did with Afghanistan, they're wearing our uniform now. What happened with Ukraine and Russia, what happened with Israel and Hamas. According to pure data, one doesn't know how to sit across another alpha and say, check yourself, stop, you cannot behave like this again. That's purely how I process the difference between Putin and Biden. I don't sit there and look at Biden and say, man, I can't wait for this guy to go into the boardroom. He's going to crush it in the boardroom behind closed doors negotiating. I say, please don't keep it behind closed doors. I want to see exactly how he's going to be negotiated. He doesn't give you that kind of a confidence.
So if you like this.
Yeah, I agree. He doesn't. Right. And I think it's a very simple point that's being made, which is that regardless of whether or not you think Putin is a good guy or a bad guy, right, that's irrelevant to the quality of leadership and what you look for in a leader. And when you're comparing those qualities that Putin has, mainly when you're talking about intelligence versus somebody like Biden, who is the good guy, right, quote unquote good guy, hey, Biden's lacking, right? He's lacking. He's not somebody I would trust to, lead us in a war against, a nuclear nation like Russia, right? Or against somebody like Putin, or to negotiate on our behalf against somebody like Putin. And that's the whole point. But again, I don't think that went over Chris Cuomo's head as much as I think that he just, like, again, the rest of the media, they have Russian derangement syndrome, where if you say anything, that can be remotely interpreted as good about Putin, okay, or good quality about Putin, they try to make it seem like you're praising him and that you want Putin to be our leader and all types of crazy stuff. That, again, is just illogical extrapolations from a very simple statement about, somebody's leadership qualities. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.